ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වරට SLT 4G වෙතින් දැන් Pure TV නරඹන්න. ඉදිරියටම ගෙන යන SLT 4G.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
The government introduces a slew of relief measures in face of the coronavirus. Beacon of hope. First Sri Lankan national to contract COVID-19 discharged from hospital. Collective contribution. The president pledges $5 million to the SARC COVID-19 emergency fund. Measured response. A window given in most districts for people to replenish food stocks before reimposition of curfew. All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Monday the 23rd of March 2020.
හැටනමයයි අනුහතට SMS කර රුපියල් මිලියන 3ක මුල්තැන්ගේ උපකරණ දිනාගෙන අවුරුද්දෙම කුස්සිය ටයිම් සේව් කරගන්න.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, joining you live from Studio 24 in Colombo. This is First at 9, your English service on AdaDerana 24. The island-wide curfew, which came into effect on Friday, was lifted temporarily today in some districts before being enforced once more at 2 p.m. It gave members of the public a window of 8 hours to replenish their stocks of essential goods. The lift did not apply to Colombo, Gampaha, Puttlam and 5 previously identified districts in the north. However, people in these areas too will be given a window of movement at 6 a.m. tomorrow. During these times, people are banned from all manners of inter-district travel.
The ongoing curfew for the districts of Colombo, Gampaha, Puttlam, Jaffna, Mena, Vaunia, Mullaitivu as well as Kilinochchi will be lifted at 6 a.m. tomorrow. The curfew, however, will be reinstated at 12 p.m. on the same day and will be effective until 6 a.m. on Friday, the 27th of March. At 12 p.m. on Friday, however, the curfew will be reimposed for Colombo, Gampaha, Puttlam, Jaffna, Mena, Vaunia, Mullaitivu and Kilinochchi. In rest of the country, where the curfew once more came into effect at 2 p.m. today, the curfew will be lifted at 6 a.m. on Thursday, the 26th of March, for 6 hours before being reimposed at 12 p.m. on the same day. Vehicular movement and transportation of foreign nationals, meanwhile, have been prohibited in all districts. The Presidential Secretariat announced that cultivation in all districts during the curfew hours will be permitted. Government has made the Minister of Agriculture and Commerce responsible for ensuring that these activities are conducted systematically. The government also ordered the closure of liquor stores in the island irrespective of whether the curfew is lifted or not. In the meantime, the curfew was lifted at 6 this morning in all districts of the country except in Colombo, Gampaha, Puttlam and the 5 stipulated districts in the north. Secretary to the President P.B. Jayasundara has instructed bank officials to keep all their branches open in areas where the curfew is lifted. He has requested that banks run with a skeleton staff, which includes the branch managers, during the hours of free movement, while urging Employees Union of the Bank of Ceylon to assist in this task. The Acting Inspector General of Police, meanwhile, has instructed police stations to allow bank employees to use their service identity cards as a form of permit during curfew. Meanwhile, Bank of Ceylon states that it has made necessary arrangements to pay the salaries of public servants. Secretary to the President Dr. P.B. Jayasundara has also issued a circular to heads of state institutions instructing them to keep the state mechanism running amid the battle against COVID-19. The President recently issued a directive to public servants to work from home until Friday the 27th of March. The government informs that this period should not be considered as a holiday and that instructions are given to pay the salaries of all public servants today. Meanwhile, issuing a statement, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa condemns the dastardly attempt to use legal arguments to block government finances and sabotage the campaign against coronavirus. The Premier says that the public should not harbour any fears about the availability of funds for the anti-coronavirus campaign, as under clause number 3 of Article 150 of the Constitution, the President is vested with the power to allocate funds from the Consolidated Fund to maintain government services after Parliament has been dissolved. Meanwhile, the police headquarters announced that 1,750 individuals have been arrested in connection with curfew violations during the past few days. A total of 447 vehicles have also been taken into police custody. In Payagala, 4 persons of the same family were arrested by Anti-Corruption Unit of the Kaluthara district for selling liquor.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa announced several relief measures today which will be granted to the general public who have been affected by the outbreak of COVID-19 in the country. The President's media division said that all relief measures will come into effect from today. The President had ordered the Governor of the Central Bank, the Secretaries of all ministries, General Secretaries of Provincial Councils and the heads of all banks, financial institutions and leasing companies to take necessary steps to ensure the public receives these relief measures. In line with these new relief measures, the deadline for payment of value-added tax, income tax, driving license renewal fees, water and electricity bills below 15,000 rupees, assessment tax, validity period of bank checks and credit card payments below 50,000 rupees have been extended until the 30th of April this year. Moreover, payment of personal loans below 1 million rupees from banks and financial institutions are suspended for 3 months. A grace period of 6 months will also be granted for lease payments on 3-wheelers. Furthermore, the allowance of 20,000 rupees for the month of March for those selected under the undergraduates employment scheme is also deposited to their banks. And the government, like I said, today introduced various relief measures which include an extension to the deadline to pay value-added tax, utility bills and even personal loans. Now, all these measures are put in place in face of one of the deadliest challenges the country has faced in the coronavirus outbreak. To speak about this, we've invited to join us via Skype business cycle analyst Dr. Kenneth De Silva, who is also a member of the Monetary Policy Consultative Committee as well as board member of the Institute of Policy Studies. Good evening, Dr. Kenneth. Thank you for joining us via Skype. A lot of relief measures have been introduced and this is amid an ongoing crisis. Tell us the impact on the economy.
Hi, Indy. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Well, I mean, these particular relief measures that have been announced by the government is unprecedented. And you would expect it to be so because we are in uncharted territory. And even, in fact, if you look at the global financial crisis of 2008, central banks did act very aggressively. And similarly, we have seen global central banks act in a similar stance and do 2 things. One is also they stimulate the economy by adding further liquidity into the system. Right. And also taking drastic measures in terms of the monetary policy action and also gave sufficient fiscal stimulus for the economy to recover from this global downturn. So our central bank also has taken similar measures under the stewardship of His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa to infuse liquidity and also to look at measures to stabilize balance sheets that are impacted by this downturn that we have faced now.
We're talking about the requirement for liquid cash in hand. We know the grace period given during this curfew period. Today we had certain districts and tomorrow Colombo, Gampaha, Putlam districts. But amid all this, it's not like everybody has access to debit cards or ATMs. This liquid cash, the question of that, what measures will you take to facilitate this to people, because they have a very short period and you know, there's a sense of panic among people, but at the same time there's a lot of measures that the government has put in place to ensure that normalcy is restored while battling this deadly virus and the crisis situation to mitigate it.
Yeah, I mean, on the cash side, there are two components. You're right. Everyone doesn't have access to credit cards and debit cards. The government is quite cognizant about that particular aspect, and there is a measure to hand out people with dry rations, people who basically live off daily wages, people who have issues with steady cash flow. So these are the people who are directly impacted by as a result of these particular curfews that have been enforced. So the government, through the Samurdhi network of officers, has institutionalized a framework to get relief in terms of dry rations out to these people immediately, and that's been already done. So that's fairly encouraging. While on the cash side of the transactions, we look at central bank kind of asking banks to open up their businesses. The RTGS is also going to be functioning from tomorrow. And also we see that banks have become more proactive in ensuring that businesses are back to their normalcy in an abnormal market condition. That is the challenge we face, because banks have to now step up and ensure that these moratoriums and the relief that we are given is passed through to the real economy and to the businesses that are suffering, including all the local entrepreneurs and also the individuals. The individuals also have cash flow issues. There are people who have been laid off or been asked to have pay cuts. All that needs to be factored in their liquidity management, and that liquidity management process has to ensure that banks have access to the funding mechanism put in by central bank. That is an important aspect, because central bank has come in and said that, look, we will provide liquidity at a concession rate of 4%. Now you kindly pass this liquidity on to the general public and ensure that they function, not only the banks take this liquidity into consideration.
The central bank has proactively come forward to address this issue, to look at supporting people in this time of a health crisis. But at the same time, like I said, a member of the Monetary Policy Consultative Committee, you will be taken seriously just as other members. What suggestions do you have going forward in the post-curfew period? Because that's going to be the most important time when everyone gets back to business, when economy gets back to normalcy and people return to work, and there is a lot of activity, and we have to look within the manufacturing process in Sri Lanka with global movement of goods, commodities restricted. There will be a requirement for us to spur economic activity, domestic manufacturing activity and industry.
You're right, Rindi. I mean, we are looking at a new type of economic model that will unfold as a result of this. We know that while our income is going to be also reduced from our export earnings and remittances point of view, our expenditure also proportionately will be reduced. So from a cash flow point of view, the government is not that badly off. So that's fairly encouraging. Also, from an economic structure point of view, we have seen some of the local manufacturers step up, including the apparel sector stepping up and now producing these so-called medical kits that are required on a global scale. And also, we have seen some of our local manufacturers come out and use agro-based products to develop sanitization, hand sanitization, which is required at a global scale, and that is good. And in fact, because of these particular products that are available locally, we have managed to conduct an island-wide sanitization program without worrying too much about the supply side of these particular raw materials. So that's a good thing, and I think the government is on the right track in terms of encouraging the entrepreneurs. As a result of this particular fallout of the economy, there are new businesses that will emerge, and that's encouraging.
Yes,
and you
certainly
spoke about also the initiatives that need to be looked into given the post-curfew era. I mean, that's something that is very important, because I think the banking sector has to play a big role by looking at extending their banking facilities in terms of the liquidity and also settlements, because currently the banks stop their business at around 2:30 in the evening. Now that's not going to be sufficient, because we have to get this transaction activity back up to pace. So banking sector will have to look at extending some of the banking settlement times, and also looking at working through this with the government and coming up with newer measures to support the country at a time of need. That's something that I'm really looking forward to see from the banking sector CEOs who have been rather silent on this whole issue.
Certainly, thank you very much, and I'm sure you'll be pushing for all this as a member of the Monetary Policy Consultative Committee. We had with us Dr. Kenneth De Silva joining us via Skype to discuss about relief measures. We move on to our other local stories. Today is a day which gives hope for Sri Lanka as the government intensifies its fight against the spread of COVID-19. The very latest the development is that the first Sri Lankan who contracted the virus out of hospital with a clear bill of health. Derana, who is a tour guide, accompanied a group of Italians, tested positive for the deadly virus on the 11th of this month, and he was discharged from the infectious disease hospital 2 weeks after being admitted. Meanwhile, with 10 new cases of infections being detected today, the number of COVID-19 patients in the country increased to 91. Over 220 people, including foreigners, are currently under medical observation over suspicion of contracting the virus.
52-year-old Derana, a chauffeur tourist guide lecturer, was confirmed as the first COVID-19 infected Sri Lankan on the 11th of this month. Rana had guided a group of Italian tourists who has been in Sri Lanka from the 3rd to the 8th of March and visited Sigiriya, Polonnaruwa and Kandy, lodging in hotels in those areas. After being treated at the Infectious Diseases Hospital for 2 weeks, he was discharged today after being confirmed to have completely recovered. According to the epidemiology unit, 220 people and 7 foreigners are currently under medical supervision in 18 hospitals island-wide. After the first local case was reported on the 11th of this month, the highest number of cases has been reported on the 17th and 19th. The highest number of infections reported in a single day was 13. To prevent the spread of the virus, 3,458 persons are now placed at 45 quarantine facilities. Among them are 444 devotees who arrived from Damadeva, India. About 15,000 persons identified by health, intelligence, military and police units and as well as public health inspectors are instructed to self-quarantine themselves. In the meantime, a local refused to adhere to instructions given by a PHI to self-quarantine himself for 14 days. The person in question is a resident of Maradana and had come to Mahianganaya to visit a friend. Upon police making submissions to court against the lack of compliance of the individual, the Mahianganaya Magistrates Court ordered a 14-day quarantine period for him, while ordering that he be arrested at the conclusion of the quarantine period. In the meantime, acting on a tip-off, PHIs of Pulpitigama went in search of a person suspected to have contracted COVID-19. When approached, the person in question had allegedly behaved aggressively and had later been taken into police custody, following which he took his own life. Meanwhile, public health inspectors have taken steps to self-quarantine hotel staff at an establishment in Bandaravela after a staffer was diagnosed with coronavirus. Our correspondent on the ground says that individuals who came into contact with the infected were identified after checking the hotel's CCTV footage. 30 hospitals have been set up across the country to treat COVID-19 patients and possible carriers. In addition, a building complex in Iranavilla was renovated by the army with necessary facilities. The base hospital in Homagama was transformed into a special hospital to treat COVID-19 patients. Meanwhile, 80 employees of a hotel which accommodated the Swiss Catholic priest was placed under quarantine. Elsewhere, a resident of Navalapitiya who was a recent arrival from Italy was released after the 14-day quarantine process. In the meantime, the company anchor joined hands with AdaDerana today in the fight against the coronavirus COVID-19. They donated 10 million rupees for the cause. The management of Sri Lanka Cricket too decided to make a donation of 25 million rupees to support the government's efforts against COVID-19. Meanwhile, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation has commenced the production of chemical fluids used for disinfection. Accordingly, the liquid was distributed to police stations, depots and religious places at the CPETCO premises. With the government taking all measures possible to tackle the spread of the virus, many areas across the country, including Colombo and Gampaha district, were disinfected today.
Sri Lanka joins the SARC region in combating COVID-19. We'll bring you details as we return after this break.
කොරෝනා වෛරසය පැතිරීම වළක්වන්න සබන් යොදා දෑත් සෝදන්න.
අවශ්‍යයෙන් ඔබේ මුළු පවුලම 100% දක්වා විෂබීජවලින් ආරක්ෂා කර දේ.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa pledged $5 million in contribution to the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation's COVID-19 Emergency Fund. At SARC leaders' video conference on combating COVID-19 pandemic, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi advocated a COVID-19 emergency fund for the SARC countries can draw from to deal with the related issues. As a starting point, Premier Modi pledged $10 million to the fund. Subsequently, Nepal and Afghanistan promised $1 million each, and the Maldives and Bhutan committed $200,000 and $100,000 respectively. The SARC is a regional intergovernmental organization and geopolitical union of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Following today's curfew lift in some parts of the country, a positive response from the people was seen towards the guidelines put in place to minimize the spread of COVID-19. The day, however, wasn't without irresponsible behavior by some people who did not heed the instructions of health authorities.
Besides Colombo, Gampaha, Putlam and 5 northern districts, the island-wide curfew, which came into effect last Friday at 6 p.m, was lifted temporarily for 8 hours today. During this window, the government had put in place necessary measures to ensure that people were able to restock essential food items without hassle. The Derana media network constantly reminded members of the public the guidelines outlined by the health authorities on what the conduct of the public should be during the window in preventing the spread of COVID-19. After all, it is the responsibility of all to ensure that the country does not fall into the clutches of this deadly virus. There were clear examples of the people responding positively to our message as they observed the wearing of face masks as well as maintaining the minimum distance from each other at public places. In the meantime, various supermarkets also took commendable measures to minimize consumer congestion as they flocked to replenish their food stocks. Some people, meanwhile, were seen distributing face masks to customers who shopped at supermarkets. Although many people adhered to the guidelines introduced to prevent the spread of COVID-19, some did not care for it. This was the situation at the Dambul Economic Centre this morning. Irresponsible behaviour of people was also witnessed at some supermarkets and fuel stations as they did away with the safety guidelines. In the meantime, the Public Health Inspector of the Anuradhapura Municipal Council and the police made the public aware on safety measures that should be adhered to when doing their shopping during this period of caution. The Department of Government Information also released a statement today as they too gave a set of guidelines to be followed, urging people to only use public transport as a matter of necessity while maintaining a distance of a metre among each other. The statement also makes it mandatory for people to visit the closest stores and supermarkets while ensuring that a single member from a family makes the trip to purchase goods. It also stipulates that the relevant person making the shopping trip should not be an elderly person, while urging shoppers to maintain a distance of a metre from each other at all times, keeping the time spent shopping at a minimum. Meanwhile, shop owners, management and their security staff should ensure that shop premises are not overcrowded. The government also insists that the safety instructions should also be adhered to when shoppers make the return trip home.
And we'll talk about what kind of volatility the Colombo Stock Exchange is experiencing after this break. The Colombo Stock Exchange says it experienced market volatility brought on by COVID-19 pandemic at levels similar to that of the global financial crisis of year 2008. In a media communique intended to give an understanding on market halts, the CSE said that this is depicted in a 30-minute market halt being imposed on the 10th, 12th, 13th and the 20th of March this year due to the S&P SL20 index declining over 5% from the previous day's closing levels.
In a media communique, the CSE said that a market halt is applicable to trading on all securities and is imposed as a measure to provide a cooling off period during a steep decline in the share prices. It added that market halts offer an opportunity for the investors to closely consider the available information and review their investment strategies in the wake of a rapidly declining market. An initial market halt is imposed on all securities traded on the CSE temporarily for a period of 30 minutes in the event of the S&P SL20 index recording a decline of above 5% compared to the previous day's closing level. Further market halts may be imposed within the same trading day in the event the S&P SL20 index records a further decline of above 5% upon reopening the market following the initial market halt. Essentially, the market will be halted for a period of 30 minutes at every 5% decline in the S&P SL20 index within a trading day. A market halt, however, does not mean the shutdown of the market for the day. As a halt is imposed, the CSE says that it continues all other operational aspects to ensure that regular trading can commence upon completing the 30-minute halt period. A market halt also does not result in an end of trading for the day unless the halt is imposed at 2 p.m. or later, where the 30-minute halt would remain in effect till the end of the scheduled regular trading, which usually takes place at 2:30 p.m. at the CSE. The CSE also notes that market halts are not a panic or ad hoc measure taken by stock exchanges, and they are a well-coordinated, predefined measure to mitigate the sudden effects of an extreme price decline and is conducted in the best interest of the investment community and capital market stakeholders.
And that's all the news tonight on First at 9. Thank you for watching. Good night.